It's v.h.s.x. What do you mean?
Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're going to be doing another reaction discussion video that was actually recommended by many of you guys in the Discord community that wanted a follow-up video that was responding to Skrump's recent statement saying that gen regression is actually in a good spot. Unironically, no laugh tracks, no jokes, no sitcom entry, nothing. We got basically with a straight face, with chest fully puffed out. Bro said that gen regression was in a good spot, and I had to replay that clip a couple of times because I think I could not believe my ears. I did not think I heard correctly. So seems like we have a video here from Skrump once again to backtrack, and this was actually, like I've stated earlier, recommended by multiple times by you guys, which if you want to go ahead and suggest videos to be discussed, you can go ahead and join the Discord, accept the rules with the knife in the rules tab, and you can speak with the rest of us about DVD or other topics, books, novels, movies, TV shows, whatever you want, gaming in general, doesn't matter. It's all there. So we're gonna go ahead and get into it. If you want to watch the original video, it's linked in the description, of course. But we're going to kind of skip a little bit around because I am curious to kind of hear the ridiculousness that is going to be within the video. So let's go ahead and take a look.
This week I made a video talking about the different eras of generator defense in Dead by Daylight, highlighting certain metas that came and went over the years, and delved into some reasons that they had to change. This video, to my surprise, sparked a lot of comments from people who disagreed with some of the points I had made, specifically at the end of the video where I mentioned that I felt gen regression was in a good state for the game, and thought that the perks that did exist were solid, but didn't feel super necessary to use for the killer side, and also didn't feel miserable to face for the survivors. Oddly,
so at least we understand that, you know, for anybody who maybe hasn't seen the original video or even the one that I covered, you know, as well, you got a little synopsis, if you will, of what it is that was stated. I didn't even touch on the whole like perks not. Oh, nah, that's a whole nother discussion that I can't even begin to get into right now. But no, that is extremely inaccurate for a vast majority of the roster. I have no idea what the hell he's playing. I don't know what killer he's playing. I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but let's continue.
enough, that statement seemed to be what really irked people, mostly killer players from the looks of it. That alone made me take a...
Okay, so I want to quickly pause it there as well, because just within the language you can see, you know, what we're talking about here. Now let me play it again so you guys can listen to it.
Seemed to be what really irked people, mostly killer players from the...
Think about that for a second. I pause it because you have to keep in mind when understanding when people are trying to communicate in any scenario, in anything, whether it be a conversation or even a discussion, debate, whatever you want to talk about, there is different uses of language that are trying to convey certain things. So within this instance, right, because remember, these videos are most likely scripted. So we're taking the time out to write the script and really imply, right, from the very beginning. Notice the language. It really irked people, right? It's not just like, oh, people disagreed and it was just like a thing. It was like, oh, it really irked people, and it was mostly the killer players. And it's like, you kind of see the language that they're trying to imply. Like, they're trying to, you know, make it seem as if it's way smaller than it is, even though that you're factually being disproven by people's just literal statements. Like, they have evidence to prove these things. We disagree because it's factually disproven. Like, it's not because, oh, there's killer players like saying this, so clearly it's not valid. Like, no, it's been proven. Like, a good majority of the roster is not using these perks to the best of their ability. Gen regression is not in a good spot when only the S tiers can use it at the effective level that it should be. That already should be a statement saying that that's a bad thing. There's no reason that only some characters can use all of the perks, and then the other characters can only use maybe 2 out of the, how many we have now? Like, it's kind of ridiculous. But that's besides the point, right? Let's continue.
The looks of it. That alone made me take a second look at what I said in that video, because in my mind I hadn't said anything crazy or controversial. From my personal experience, I rarely feel like generators are flying by unless I'm actively choosing to take chases or pressure the map in a way that makes it possible for survivors to complete the gens.
So as we're hearing, at least from what Skrump is telling us, he's essentially saying, I don't play a lot of killer at high level. I don't necessarily play, any sort of weaker killers. I play mainly mid-tier killers. I don't experience these things because I'm not engaging with the sort of the game in that kind of way. So I'm making this like blanket statement that has no basis in actual, I guess you could say no basis in reality, because it is this proven by facts, data, evidence, you know what I mean, stuff like that. But because he's using an anecdotal perspective to blanket statement everybody else, of course people are going to collectively disagree, because there is, like I keep stating, stuff that proves again.
Dead by Daylight matches, it's easy to point to gen speed as the biggest factor regarding it, and that does make sense. After all, completing generators is the main objective for survivors, and how fast generators go definitely contributes to the game's overall pace. That being said, there is a lot more that goes into that than simply just how fast you can physically complete a generator. A lot of subtle nuances that seem to go completely ignored every time this issue is brought up in any way. I mean, sure, there are absolutely some strong things people can bring into matches to complete generators quickly, such as the diabolical hyper-focus and stakeout combination, which can absolutely 100% be oppressive in the right hands. Or as an example, some people were linking me to a video that Hens made highlighting him and a few others working together to complete generators really fast, using that as an example for why gen speed is broken in most games. However, I don't think that this is necessarily the problem, the potential speed that generators can be done at. In fact, I think capping generator speed would be a super easy and absolutely fine way to fix that problem, but that's besides the point. Obviously, there are some extremely problematic outliers, but they're just that, outliers. I doubt you're consistently going against teams who are all bringing hyper-focus and stakeout, or a team all doing exactly.
So here's like the bit of a problem, right? He's acknowledging the fact that this is an actual thing that occurs. He's acknowledging the fact that that world record exists, but then simultaneously is going around and saying, I doubt that you're actually experiencing that. And that's when I have to say, like, no, that's not necessarily accurate. I mean, if we understand what the meta is at right now, we have to understand that not only was there a video that somebody put on the same build that Hens was using and was pretty much able to complete the gen alone in 32 seconds. So that already is way less time. And just think about, let's say the person does that a couple of times. You're going to lose a lot of gens in about a minute or so. Maybe you're going to lose 2 gens or 3, or maybe 2.5. So in that situation, just from gen speed alone, a vast majority of the roster is not able to compensate for that sort of objective being pushed as fast as it is. And to say that, oh, I doubt that is the case, I mean, this is still meta, right? But even without gen perks, we can use an example from my own gameplay, which if you guys were there, you already know the example I'm going to use. We were in Chaos Shuffle with Myers. No one had gen perks, right? Because they couldn't bring their perk selection. The game ended in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And I actually have 2 more examples that I recorded as well, and which I want to try to actually make a full video for, covering multiple instances of games like are under 5 minutes, 4 minutes usually, 4 minutes, maybe less than that. And a lot of killers are going to be walking out with maybe 2 hooks if they're lucky, maybe 3, depending on their character. So because of the fact that I'm assuming maybe this, maybe Skrump isn't really playing killer enough, or maybe is just not, for whatever reason, like just not seeing this somehow, like even though there's plenty of examples that it does occur, whether it be somebody who explains their experience, or whether, we're streaming it or whatever have you, depending on the person, the evidence is all there. So to be in disbelief, to just say, oh, you're wrong because I don't think you actually experienced that, isn't necessarily like the really accurate, because then how do you explain that this is occurring? Like, that doesn't really make any sense.
what Hens did in his video. It's just not going to happen like that, I promise. Now, that doesn't mean I think your complaints about the speed of Dead by Daylight matches are invalid, but what it does mean is that I think what you feel like might be the issue isn't entirely the issue. When we're talking about gen speed, we're not actually talking about quote-unquote gen speed, at least not in the traditional sense. I really don't think there's anything wrong with how fast generators can literally be completed at, other than those edge case scenarios I just mentioned, which was the point at the end of my gen regression metas video.
My issue, obviously, with that kind of statement is that if it's somehow an outlier, then why is it so common? It happens extremely frequently, so I don't think that's an outlier, because you can say the build itself is the outlier, but the frequency of the gens, like, popping is honestly not an outlier. Like, this is a pretty common thing. Even without having the gen perks, which is very strange. And I can't really begin to explain why that even is the case or how that's even physically possible. But anytime we've ever seen a 4-minute game, 9 times out of 10, you're seeing barely any gen perks. Which is insane, which then it begs the question, how is that physically possible? It's really strange.
I think the perks that killers have for gen regression in the game right now are absolutely fine as is. Seriously, I don't think they're too weak or too strong. Maybe some of them could definitely use some buffs, but it's not to a level where the available perks are complete and total dookie. In the same way, I also don't feel like behavior loading killers up with more generator defense or just making gens slower to complete is going to fix, well, anything. I mean, I just made a video covering different metas, some of which made generators a nightmare to finish.
So he believes, so like I've even stated in the previous video, he believes because, oh, Gen's metas were bad before, now it's good now. Like that's not a logical standpoint. Because at the end of the day, we're not back in 2016. Like we're in 2020, the big 2026, bro. Big 2026. We're playing the game in this current year, dealing with the current day gen speed, the current day perks, the current day additions, the current day meta, the current day this. Like comparing it to back then and saying that it's good now is just, that just doesn't make any goddamn sense. Because the game could get better. They could fix these things if they wanted to, but they won't. But they could, right? So justifying it and not even explaining why you think gen regression is good is crazy work to me as well. I mean, as you can imagine, like I've stated, if only the S tiers can get consistent value out of a perk, maybe these perks are not that good. Because if you can use any build on an S tier, that means that any discussion when it comes to perks balancing in that sense is irrelevant to those characters, which means that the vast majority of the rest of the people who are playing, not only the rest of the roster, but even the rest of the roster in general, is going to have to be looked at, right? Because that's the majority of the roster. That is the majority of the roster that has those to kind of be more deliberate with what perks they select. If you're picking Billy, you probably don't even have to run the quad slowdown in comparison to a character that may be like, we'll say Skull Merchant for an example, who kind of needs it because they don't really have a power. Like they have a drone and that's it. Like you don't get any movement, any haste, any teleport, any dash, you don't get nothing. So it would make more sense to me that you would be running more slowdowns on, say, Skull Merchant than you would be on Billy. Just because you're downing fast or you're traveling quickly, so you're able to go from point A to point B faster. I mean, that's just a part of it, and I just don't understand how we can go around and say, oh, but clearly it's fine. It's like, but how though? Like we're like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what are we talking about?
For the options for regression, I must think that Dead by Daylight matches are perfectly paced. Right? Well, no, not quite. I think this is where I confused people with my most recent video, as my words do imply that I think generators go at a decent pace in most of my games, which is kind of true. Like I said, there are certainly edge scenarios that do happen, some more common than others, common with big quotation marks. The most I'd say I'd run into is a really strong toolbox, or maybe just one with a brand new part, which can absolutely come in clutch if I feel myself unprepared to deal with them. What are you gonna run? Franklin's Demise? Yeah, okay. So if you want to complain about gen speed specifically when running into those items or situations, go for it. I think that's completely and totally valid. However, the base game, let's say no super strong toolboxes, no crazy unexpected perks, just mostly regular Dead by Daylight gameplay, I think the pace of those matches is fine, at least in terms of gen speed specifically. See, this is where my opinions didn't come across super clear, which is absolutely my fault. I wasn't saying that I think the pace of Dead by Daylight matches is completely, totally, unequivocally fine. In fact, I do seriously have problems with the speed of some Dead by Daylight games, but it's not really tied to gen speed. Not quite. You see, I still have my matches where generators go really fast, although when I lose, I rarely find myself pointing to gen speed as the main reason that happens. I agree that sometimes you can be doing your absolute best as a killer in Dead by Daylight, but despite that fact, the gens still get completed and you're left fumbling in the endgame, trying to scrape out a few kills before you're sent back to the loadout screen. So if that's the case, what do I think is the actual problem? If it's not generator speed, what's the main flaw I'd point to for why games might feel too fast for me and apparently a large chunk of you? 2 words, or one word connected by a hyphen: macro play. In case you don't know, macro play is the gameplay that covers the larger side of matches, while micro play is more of those small player-to-player interactions.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't think macro play is really at all the big problem in the game, personally. Just to quickly summarize macro play, because there's a high likelihood that Skrump will find some way to misrepresent it. But it's understanding, you know, macro, and there's also micro play, which I think has more to do with like the 1v1. But the macro focuses, in at least within a DBD context, the 1v4 aspects, trying to slow down people in different ways. You know, to slow, let's say, we'll use that example. We'll say that one person's laid out on the ground, slugged, another person's on a hook, and you're chasing a third person. The fourth person will have to figure out the decision into getting off the gen to go then pick up someone or save someone. Whatever is more urgent, that is the macro play. Being able to do that. Now, I really don't believe that going, well, gens are fine because macro is a good argument. Because one, we're not actually explaining, you know, it's what's the word for it? Like, it's not accurate to say, oh, it's just a macro, because at the end of the day, we have to keep in mind here that the gen speed is the biggest contributing factor on top of the already buffed other stuff that's in the game, which I've stated many times. Exhaustion's already been buffed up like crazy. We have ghost notes that already got added recently that already stacks with vigil, that it already decreases exhaustion recovery, which means that you're going to get sprint bursts like way faster. You're going to get like the lives way faster. You're going to get the dramaturgies way faster. You're going to get a lot of that. And then, of course, on top of not only that, then the healing speed was also buffed because, let's say, Botany got the whole medkit efficiency removal thing taken out. That got changed. Empathic connection got changed. Resurgence got changed. So they're even stronger and stronger and stronger. So all around, you're getting heal speed, gen speed, and let's not even forget the fact that there was additional hook times as well. Right? So they had even more leeway for unhooking. Heal speed, gen speed, whatever have you, exhaustion recoveries, stuff like that. So everything on Survivor got more and more and more efficient. So there is literally zero a way to like efficiently macro, you could say, unless you are using the strongest characters in the game. But even so, like, even if you say, like, you know, me and Skrump can agree on that standpoint, gen speed is still a factor within that. Like, we can't just ignore gen speed all out the gate and go, well, let's move the goalposts and say that it's actually this now. It's like, no, the gen speed is still a factor here. Like, it's a part of it because that's one of the main things that is the fastest thing in the game. Because keep in mind, everything else is attached to it. Healing speeds being faster. Also, let's not even forget the sloppy butcher nerf, when hemorrhage and all that stuff got nerfed too. All of that connects right back to the gens. Even the anti like pulling on the hook thing, that contributed to gen speed as well, right? it always ties back to the gen speed. So when people are talking about, yo, the gen speed is crazy, it's almost shorthand for saying like this, like the side got so efficient that now gens are just rapid firing because of it. Healing is faster, meaning back to gen. If the unhook and healing is faster, back to gen. If you're in chase for longer because you have exhaustions all the time, that of course leads back to gen time. Like you name it, it's back to gen time every single time. So if they're not going to change exhaustions, they're not going to change the healing speed, they're not going to change the other stuff like what that can contribute to these things, even map size, palette density, whatever have you, gen speed is still the ongoing problem. And even beyond that, and even before even these buffs, the gen speed has been a consistent issue. Maybe not as much back then, probably wasn't as noticeable, because back then I would say, I'm gonna say like let's say 8 months ago, let's just be generous, let's say 8 months ago, it wasn't even that big of a problem, because I would say that a majority of people that were in low MMR or average MMR were not seeing the gen speeds that you're seeing like at the high level. And I noticed at a certain point that I started to see the same gen speeds I would see in my games now at low level, now at average. I go, that's weird. Like magically everyone isn't flying up to high level. You know, I'm seeing people with like green perks. I'm like, that's a little strange. Like they probably haven't been using this character or whatever have you. How is it that they're getting the fastest gen speeds in the West, right? But that goes to show you that now the gen speed has progressively gotten worse and worse and worse as a side effect of that. So let's go ahead and continue here.
Around their limbs like a vine and slowly pulls them down. I need to tell you which ones are especially problematic. However, back a while ago, that was mostly okay. Those weaker killers had to be a bit more proactive when it came to the macro play of the game. Killers like Ghostface or Trapper had to be much more proficient when it came to keeping a strong grip on the map, and being practically omnipotent for keeping tabs on the survivors. That was the skill expression there. It wasn't about ending chases quickly, but rather ending chases before they even began.
I kind of disagree with that, because obviously characters like Trapper and Ghostface don't actually have control of the maps. If anything, the survivors have much more control, because you know, you can't really cut off anybody. You can't you know, teleport anywhere. You can't actually prevent a pallet from being dropped or anything to be able to do that, right? Especially with Trapper or Ghostface, unless you're playing Trapper and you preemptively have a trap place, you might be able to cut off the tile, right, with the potential trap placement. And even then, that's not always a viable option. And even more so, let's be honest here, Trapper and Ghostface and other characters are very map dependent. So even if trying to compare, which is Skrump's main thing, is, oh, back then, it's like, yeah, but we're talking about now. So even nowadays, like, these characters are extremely map dependent, so they're not really going to consistently keep control of the map, because at the end of the day, the size of the map is going to do a lot. A character like Ghostface and Trapper are moving at 115%, so it's going to take what, like 30 seconds to cross from one side to the other, which means the gens will get done in that span of time. Compared to a Blight, a Billy, or whatever, teleports or something like that, they're taking what, 10 seconds or less. You're just in general going to be better. And I'm sure you can say that the skill expression was within the predictions in the movement. Yeah, sure, okay, yeah, that's 100% accurate. But that also doesn't necessarily mean anything if the gen speeds are just faster than anything you can keep up with. That's just the fact of the matter. Now, is there a skill issue with the vast majority of players on Killer? Of course. I can also agree with that. They do need to have better control of their maps, regardless of that. They need to have better understanding of their characters, of course. They need to have better understanding of survivor movement, of course. And that's exactly why I am putting together the Killer Course and stuff like that, so that people can learn and improve over time by looking at other people that may be at that same level or whatever have you, so that they can also see the mistakes that they also could be making themselves. They might see themselves in that video and go, oh man, I didn't even know I was making that mistake. Or I didn't even know that pathing was important. Oh, I didn't even know that the perk would work on this character. Or, oh, I didn't even know that this map had this thing, or I didn't even know that this character could do this. And it's like, I understand, like, you know what I mean, like that, because I've even heard like Scott say something similar. Like I can agree that there is a level of skill issue involved. However, we also have to keep in mind that I wouldn't imagine like every single killer in the entire game, like in the entire player base, is playing specifically Blighted, Billy, and Nurse and da. Like they're probably trying other characters that they like, Springtrap, Ghostface, Trapper, whatever. And it's like these characters should not be left in the dust just because the game is balanced around what, S tier. That's just the main thing people, I'm assuming, want to say. Like that's what they want to bring up because it's ridiculous.
Putting survivors in positions where they couldn't spend half the match looping you due to a lack of chase potential in your kit. If you play certain killers like most of the killers that come out today, you're going to get absolutely bodied. It's as simple as that. So those killers had to express their skill in an entirely different way than the larger growing roster of the game. There was just one problem with that. People absolutely hated it. Players in Dead by Daylight, specifically survivors, treat macro play like it's a war crime, and the reason they do that is, well, because it's not nearly as fun for most of them, and it's also like impossible to do in solo queue. It's so much easier to focus on individual chases and extend them for as long as possible and win that way, instead of focusing on smart macro decisions such as making sure you have a good gen spread that the killer can guard effectively, as well as taking hits for players who are at a higher risk of dying. This hatred of macro play, I think, came as a result of the killers Skull Merchant, Knight, and Singularity, and this is extremely obvious just by looking at the killer roster since those.
I do completely disagree with that statement. I think that, like, I wouldn't say that because those characters released, therefore now survivors hate macro. Like, that's just not how that works. Survivors have consistently hated macro long before those characters even released. Because anytime you'd ever see somebody trying to utilize strategies such as tunneling, such as camping, such as slugging, you would get the same exact response regardless of back then versus now. It is still the same exact response. They hate it no matter what. They hate any form of strategy. They hate any form of skill expression. It's just how it works. That's just how it's always been. It's nothing new. We know this already because we've seen this already. That's just a fact of the DBD community, and that's one of the biggest problems of the DBD community is that for some reason strategy is just frowned upon with the survivor community. They want you to follow the particular path that allows them to get free wins, essentially. That's why they try to shame players for utilizing strategy. That's why they try to insult them and call them slurs and try to tell them to use a rope and all these kinds of things, because of the fact that they just hate the fact that they keep losing. And the fact of the matter is that there are players out there that have like you could say 6k, 9k, 10k hours, still don't even know how to use check spots, still don't even know how to loop, still don't even know what the hell they're doing. And because this game is like a game around like skill, I would say it's almost like a sliding scale, because you could easily be, you know, like at 500 hours and be able to like have really good freaking pathing, be able to like one trick a character extremely well to like basically climb the ranks and be one of the best at that character. And that is a possibility. You know, they may not know every perk or what it actually does, but they can be able to actually get very good at their character. And the fact of the matter is that even with that being said, there is still so much to learn, of course. But also it's kind of telling, because it's like if you could have somebody with like the 10k hour mark and not know what the hell they're doing, and have somebody at like the 500 hour mark that could also, I wouldn't say like a full out expert, but be able to one trick a character or be extremely good, is very telling. And I think it's like, that's why I've also, once again, tying it back to the guide, it's why I think that people starting out, if they're able to have the right sort of like suggestions or like guides and things like that, they'll be able to improve like pretty much exponentially, like I would say. Because it's all, I always say, like, it's always the small things that really like lead to the biggest improvements when it comes down to a game like this. Like, just getting a little bit better with pathing is going to get you way more downs than not. That's just how it works. You know what I mean? But let's continue.
Specific killers were released. That era of the game was extremely dark. We had just come off a brutal 3-gen meta, and the next 3 killers we got—
and once again, we're tying it right back to, oh, but the past. And it's like, I don't understand like why we're trying to use that as some kind of like metric for how bad the game is now. Like, at least like from my understanding, when people talk about, at least for me personally, I can speak for myself at least, when I'm talking about the state of the game, I'm not going to be comparing it to back then, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 12 months ago, for every single discussion. Can I bring up an example from that, from maybe back then, that could be used to imply that it's even worse than that? Sure, you can do that. But I'm not going to go out of my way and say, well, you know, this isn't as bad as the gen kick meta, so that means we're in a good spot. Like that's inaccurate. That's just simply inaccurate. Because we're not even taking into account the evidence of today. We're not taking into account the evidence of what we're experiencing. We're not even taking into account the evidence of the next patch coming up, the next thing coming up. We're just not doing that. All for the sake of, oh, because it's not as bad. Like, it's a flawed argument in any way, shape, or form. The game is completely different than it was back then. Whether they care to admit it or not, it's true. It's a completely different game. But yeah, that is essentially what I want to talk about. If you want to watch the original video, it'll be linked in the description. There is an additional section here that says resets, which is probably touching on what I've already stated before, which has to do with like healing and all that other stuff, which I said was already ridiculous. But that pretty much covers a lot of what I was trying to kind of say. Like, I still think that Skrump completely missed the mark in both videos. I think he still has a lot more research to do, you know. And you know, we'll see in the future. Maybe we'll have an additional follow-up that will hopefully be able to explain a little bit as to where the disagreements are sort of coming from. Maybe not, who knows. I'm not really gonna hold my breath with you know, creators like these that kind of enjoy the fence. But regardless, appreciate you guys listening. If you want to support the channel, consider hitting that like button and leaving a comment on your thoughts. And even subbing. If you really want to support the channel, you can go ahead and become a member on YouTube, Patreon, or even subbing on Twitch, so you can have your name at the red off at the end of every video. See you guys in the next one. All right, let's go ahead and read off our members from Patreon. Pro King 101, YouTube members: Kargan Falcon, Evil Blade, Cap Courteous, WTF You're Not JLo, Evil Peach, Cozy Bozy, Theo Endire, Dole Whip, Noxus, Zero Mocker, Jack, Christian, and Crow Vader. And for the Twitch, we have Final Girl Bunny, Leona Art, Zazabu, Evil Blade, Danica, Crow Vader, Cake is a Road, Zeneron, Ginsburg, Mr. Morik, Kevin, Zero Mocker, Ashai Boo, and Gryffindor. Appreciate you guys supporting. Really means a lot. If you want to become a member, you can go ahead and join through Patreon or YouTube members, or even sub on Twitch. See you guys in the next one.